Josh Cook, welcome to Freedom Over Fascism.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm glad that you are, especially after my conversation last week with Tara McGowan. Um, and we have been talking about, and my focus going forward for the next however long is on the information war. We know that the right wing has a nearly impenetrable bubble. And so their people think that Elon Musk is just getting the information of the liberals and cutting out waste and doing good things for the country. The people who still stick with mainstream legacy corporate media are getting kind of a watered down version. You know, a muscular Trump is doing overhauls as opposed to who. And the left wing is mostly people online doing podcasts or shows on YouTube with influencers. And you are involved with a group called Chorus who uh, wants to make those or help those influencers uh, create an organization. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, thanks for being here. Longtime fan, so this is great. I think we're all sort of seeing what I think a lot of us knew for a long time, right? That the coverage on cable or insert your favorite morning newsletter, whatever it is, um, isn't isn't and wasn't sort of covering, I think, the urgency of moments over the past few years in the way that a lot of us felt it. And now that we're in this new moment, especially, it couldn't be more clear that there's a disconnect. At the same time, I've had the luxury of working alongside a number of influencers, online creators, former traditional news voices who have moved online as those other spaces just crumbled. And every single day, we would see their numbers just get bigger and bigger because people trust people. And especially in this moment where you're not quite sure who's giving you, accurate or just full truth information, you trust a face in front of you. You can build rapport, just like your favorite podcast, just like your favorite writer. Same thing holds true for your favorite TikToker or YouTuber. All those things sort of stand out. So as folks are moving to this place, the part that hasn't moved over, and especially now where we feel outgunned, for lack of a better term, is the structure and support systems that made traditional and just any form of sort of news sharing work in the past. So there's not coordinated newsrooms, fact checking, benefits, salaries, or if you're thinking about this from a for-profit side, which we're not as a first and foremost, but it's still interesting. There's not a publisher side. We don't have a classified section. We don't have ad sales. The right has this advantage where they can look a lot more like a traditional news for-profit company because they have doomsday prep kits that they can sell. And the left doesn't have that same sort of commerce eco space built out, right? Like they have
Right.
corporate sponsors. They're fascinating. They're My Pillow. They're things that I don't think folks on the left want to buy. I mean,
No, but they also have the billionaires just
and they have both,
funneling money.
but they're able to sort of recreate a bit more of the back end to support their voices than we've been able to. And then the
Mhm.
other problem on the left is we just haven't tried. And so that's what Chorus is really trying to do. We know who are impactful voices. We know that when we see new impactful voices, there should be ways to support them so that they can scale. And the reality is that this gets harder and harder to do the more complicated the internet gets and the more fragmented it gets. So Chorus is aiming to be uh, a central source for support for impactful voices. So that can be everything from stipends and salaries, benefits, but also newsroom support, editorial support, legal support, and production and scale. It
Wow.
takes a lot of work to go from TikTok to YouTube. It's a completely different medium. It takes a lot of work to grow your following on these different platforms. They all have completely different games to play with the algorithms. But what we found is we have creators who know what they're doing on each and every one of them. And if we can just get them all in a room to collaborate, and they can bring the people they work with every day independently together, the results mean everyone wins and everyone grows. And so we want to just sort of make that a centralized process and also put the creator first. So rather than organizations, and this isn't a knock on anyone who's been supporting creators, but in the issue space, they all have their own points of view. They're all trying to achieve their own messaging goals. None of those things are bad, but it just means that it's a fragmented narrative versus letting creators do what they do day in and day out and finding ways to support their work and the missions you might have as an organization in more long-term settings versus what we all saw, which was the last 2 months before the election. Every organization was working with creators, and then they
Right.
were gone the day after the election.
Right. And the campaigns and the officials had no idea how to navigate creators versus mainstream media. I want to go back to something you said, which is you said you wanted to help everyone in the creator space. What does that everyone mean?
Yeah,
Uh,
there's an asterisk there.
no, I mean, I, this is pure self-interest. Also, interest in the information environment, but someone like me is much, much lower a scale than a lot of the people that we think of as influencers, and yet without money, which you don't get, when you don't have very much, it's hard to stay doing stuff because you don't have enough money, and doing it for free doesn't last for very long. So I'm just curious how
Yeah,
you scale that.
no, it's a really good question. I mean, uh, so I am advisor to Chorus. My other day job, I run a influencer focused agency that works with advocacy organizations. And there are times where we would reach out to a creator with an opportunity, a paid opportunity, and they would say, "This is great, but I'm working a retail job for the next 3 days. I don't have enough time to take a break and sort of do this, so I have to say no." And that crushes you on like 7 levels, right?
Hmm.
Um, but the things that we know folks need sort of vary along those lines, where just some consistency to revenue. So thinking about, you know, are there ways to underwrite voices versus paying them per piece of content, which is how it works now. I mean, our best voices on the left online, outside of a few exceptions, are effectively gig workers start to finish. And so if you imagine like paying Rachel Maddow per segment, and every segment must be backed by a different group and they get to control all the pieces, like it's not good and it doesn't work and it wouldn't be sustainable. And that's not how any other space works. So um, in this one where it's so fragmented and there's so many voices that potentially could benefit from something like this, we're still building out some of the ways we want to sort of evaluate where can we make the most impact. But I think the thing that we do believe is if we can't necessarily support you with, a lot of dollars to like get it going, we do believe that there are tools and just access to resources and community in a different way that are truly built around scaling that we can provide to get you to a place where either more people are just coming to you with opportunities or sponsorship, or we can move you into sort of a next tier of operations. So we have some creators who have said outright to us, I don't want your money. I don't need your money. I'm doing okay. But I would love help getting more access to elected officials, or I just cannot figure out how to translate what I've done on YouTube to Instagram. And I fully recognize I'm not good at it. And I could really use like some like consistent support on it
Hmm.
to get it there. And so some of that could just be production support, right? Like I'm sure you have a whole process to go from this conversation to getting it out into the world. And that's probably 5 hours more than this conversation will be.
So 10.
There you go.
I mean,
But you're
uh,
a solo operator, right? Like
mhm,
that's hard. That shouldn't have to be so hard. We don't burden folks who do radio programs in this way. It's like if you listen to an NPR show, like they name like 19 producers at the end of it.
right,
There's a reason. But
right.
in this space, that the central node is not a newsroom; it's a platform, and the platform does not care about you. So we want to fill in that middle piece as best we can. But it's not everyone.
N- No, I just read, I'll be talking to Kyle Tharp,
Love
um,
Tyler.
right, um, soon. And I just read a piece that he featured looking at Substack, for example, the people who are the most popular on Substack, the Heather Cox Richardsons, the um, uh, the contrarian, all the
Yeah.
people that
Yeah.
are the top, they can be making upwards of $5 million a year.
Yeah.
And I had I mean, I guess if I had thought about it and done the math, I would have gotten there. But that is such a huge, I mean, Heather Cox Richardson is kind of in a class by herself, but that's such a huge difference in terms of resources and help, um, they have producers and they have researchers and and I think that allows them to put their best brain power into their content as opposed to,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna say this, but then I have to spend 10 hours doing this, and where's my research time and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's a completely different game. And the thing with those folks is, um, even if they're on the upper end of success, they're running a small business themselves, so that adds a whole nother burden to the mix. And or if you said, okay, you're great at Substack, we should get you into video, we should get you, like, it's still like these big unknowns because you're just in that exploration point as still somewhat independent operators. There's only a few exceptions to that. And that's just a reality of like this fragmented media space. There's different platforms for different people, and how you play in that, and if you should be everywhere, is a question that I have an opinion on, but I think a lot of people would probably disagree. So these are
So
all
what's your
normal.
opinion on that?
I mean, I'd like good thoughts to be in as many places as possible, but and I think about it in the way that my dad is a Facebook user. He will never be a user of any other platform I use or that my younger cousin uses. He's Facebook probably till the end of his days, which is a long time.
You would be very surprised. My mother, an avid Facebook user and MSNBC watcher, has left both and
Okay,
is now reading Substack. I don't think she listens to podcasts, but she's
fair,
like
totally
made
fair.
that half a step. So,
Yeah, well,
there's hope for everybody.
no, totally. But I think the big thing is once you get comfortable in certain
Yes.
spaces, uh, pending disruption. Like I used to love Twitter. I try not to use X. Um, those sort of places where folks get comfortable make it harder if you are the person delivering content or feel like you have something to share. Well, now you can't write off Facebook as part of your distribution. You can't write off Instagram. You can't write off TikTok necessarily, but all of them have completely different formats.
Right.
It's just a lot of production. It's a lot of back end, and I think this idea that we can have a long term sustainable stream of trustable information, let alone opinion, um, it's not realistic unless we build some back end support. Um, and sometimes it can be tied to sustainable capitalism, and sometimes, just like what we used to appreciate the government for, like some things aren't meant to necessarily be profit generating. Newspapers ran for a long time just with classifieds and
Mhm.
made the rest work. We have to sort of understand where these pieces come from, and they're always all connected.
I think that's true. And one of the last thing you said, how they're all connected, I think is a really important question because I think that on several levels, that piece of connection is something that's so important in this particular moment where everything is fragmenting, the government is fragmenting, the populace is fragmenting. And I've thought a lot about, well, there are some podcast networks. There are some, I think I would guess YouTube networks. I'm not really like, and there are groups that do Twitch but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of connection between creators or, just ways for creators to connect as humans in this really difficult place, and how they can connect with their audience as humans.
Yeah.
Um, so is there an aspect to which you know, that you are thinking about?
Yeah, some of the creators in this sort of initial founding group of chorus folks, and I should say, like, we've had, I forget what the final number is, but we probably got close to 1,000 folks who have reached out being like, I'd like to be a part of this, and they make great content. And what we've said to them all is, we will come we will come and find a way to work with you. We just don't want to overpromise and underdeliver.
Hmm.
Our initial cohort are folks that we sort of had a little bit deeper relationships with, who understood, like, this is something where we need a little help from you before we can really, like, pay it back in full. But two of the folks in that group, at least two of the folks in that group, in the past year or two, have become New York Times best-selling authors. And they both wrote incredible books, which you should read. One's by Lee McGowan, Politics Girl. The other, Brian Tyler Cohen. They're both somewhere in my office. The part of that is that they were able to take that audience connection and trust and, affection, and bring it to a new medium, and people wanted to follow them there. And then if you went to an event that they did around those book tours, I mean, you couldn't have asked for a more happy room of people who were all, like, united around this voice and the way that that voice delivered, facts and information to them. And it truly felt like community. And so I think that's something we're super interested in building out. Can we really take this to more places in real life and bring people together? Are there opportunities to take two creators who, as people, know each other, like each other, but haven't had a chance or just the runway to work together on something new? We would love to be part of that spark, because I think if you look at the other side and you strip away what they're talking about, the things they've done pretty well include pairing up personalities on a much more regular cadence than we do. And, we can say, well, maybe that doesn't matter. I think it matters a ton. And if you look at any other, like, we can take it out of politics. If you look at sports, if you look at entertainment, if you look at comedy, the same thing happens in all those spaces. People come together and have conversations on a much more regular cadence.
Hmm.
And it's because they all have ways to support the model of the content they're creating that allows for them to do that. Whereas our folks are, of all the spaces, by far the most limited on revenue resources, at least for now.
Hmm.
And so they really have to focus on this, like, more consumer brand focused model, which is like, I need a partnership for a video. Someone's paying me for a video. No one's paying for
Right.
me to talk to someone else. So I think if we can free them up a little more to feel empowered to do the things they really want to do, like have more collaborative conversations, you're going to see, I think, some of that network effect, like a podcast network, and that community in real life. I mean, we talked to a creator who's not really political. She's a former educator, and she's phenomenal. But she runs a book club through her Instagram feed and gets, I forget what the number is. It's something like almost 100,000 people participate every year in, like, 3 books a year. And the
Wow.
conversations are a mix of, like, a chat on, the Instagram broadcast channels she has, and then some, like, Zoom get-togethers. But, like, that type of community all came out of a bunch of people who all responded to someone's content.
Right.
And so I think there's a ton more and you can take that down to campaigns and organizing. What if we
Hmm.
can take groups of followers from creators and give them much more tangible ways to organize? There were some folks who tried to do this and fairly successfully with um, Twitch streaming communities, moving them to Discord communities, and building conversations and ways to, like, let's all meet up and go knock doors.
Right.
There's so many offshoots of this that I think if we can just be more intentional in this interim period, like, it will pay off in a number of ways.
Well, yeah, I think that, Simon Rosenberg, for example, did it very intentionally, but it's a combination of their voice and their charisma and their background to be able to bring together so many people and raise money and knock doors and make phone calls and and as you said, there are many, many fewer of those than there are people who want to make content. And I've been thinking a lot about this, is it has to be a charismatic person in one way or another. Um, and all of those things together, um, I think you have people who, are great in the Twitch Discord thing that my my 17-year-old is
Perfect example.
totally
Yep.
immersed in.
Yep.
But would they, I don't know. A lot of them do a lot of things. A lot of them have podcasts, and then they have, but it's really YouTube because the younger ones don't actually listen to podcasts. They just watch on YouTube and blah blah blah. So how are you guys thinking about bringing that? Is the first step identifying people? Is the first step like coming up with some sort of um, structure to plug people in? Like, how do you start something like this?
Yeah. I'm going to keep a couple cards tucked up my sleeve on this
Of
answer, but
course.
I think where we're sitting to achieve what we're trying to achieve, there's sort of two things we want to have running um, parallel tracks. One is really beginning to get true support to creators, and that can be monetary or in resources around production or research or booking. But to do that second piece on providing the resources, we do want to have some centralized staff and programming that then once we build that, our theory of the case is every time we meet a creator and sort of understand their needs, ideally we can have at least the beginning of ways to give them something that could be valuable to them and help sort of this larger mission. And so the number of creators across platforms, and this goes to writers, to podcasts, to streamers, it's universal. Even the biggest voices you can think of have said the same thing. It's awfully hard to get elected officials to talk to us regularly. Even the biggest accounts be like, yeah, they'll talk to me once a year, and they just don't get it. And so
Right.
I think uh, that tide is turning in the right direction for these voices as folks sort of realize we might have done this wrong. But there's a lot of education that needs to be done, so we're doing that. We've spoken with and I'm in Washington next week. I'm speaking with a lot of comms directors for elected officials, and what we're showing them is when when your surrogate goes and speaks to this streamer, you might see and appreciate that they got a few tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of views on their main video. But what you might not notice is they then cut that video up 18 different ways for other platforms, and you're getting another 5 million views off that. So like the reach of this by every metric is better than if you go on like the 4 p.m. hour of MSNBC hosted by I have no idea who at this point. And that knowledge, I think, just isn't in sort of the default of most folks who are thinking about the strategies that they're bringing to how do we tell our message of what we're working on out to the world. So doing that education piece is something we're doing very proactively so that we can make booking and availability much easier for these creators. And if you're on the other side of this and you are that comms director, you say like, I want to do this all day. I just have no idea how to reach out to the right people or evaluate who I should go to. This is where having a centralized, sort of mini newsroom where you can literally call up an assignment desk and say, our elected official just introduced a bill about something, and this is why it's important. Who might want to talk to us about this? Please, someone. We'll know
Right.
exactly who. And so
Right.
just making those connections and bringing some of that sort of more traditional back end newsroom support that can translate to your son's favorite streamer on Twitch or, your favorite podcaster or Substacker. And I think that's the stuff where it doesn't necessarily have to have a large cost, but it just does need collaboration on both ends and a
Hmm.
centralized meeting space to make it happen. So
Right.
we're trying to do as many of those types of things as we can as early as possible. And then ideally we keep building out on production, on helping with scale, and things like fellowships and sort of collaboration partnerships, things like that. But
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I will say this is not something that we're building to fix the future of the left in 2026. This is not to solve everything by 2028, although we really, God willing, should. Um, this is a long-term thing. I don't think you're going to go from a fragmented media space back to anything like a traditional three-channel world that my parents and grandparents lived in. We're not going back the other way, and fragmentation will only continue to grow. So in that, we have to build something that is sustainable for the long term and knows that we're going to be adding new personalities to it probably endlessly.
Right. Um, so one of the things I was, oh, so one of the things I want to say is I saw Brian Tyler Cohen. Gavin Newsom came and spoke to him, and I thought that was something that people, electeds on his level haven't really gotten yet.
Yeah.
And and that may just be because he has better advisors and has a better sense. Um, it is relatively easy to get local and state um, officials, um, but that national level is, I think, I really don't think they understand how wide a distribution they could get. And the other thing is, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I'll just say
So,
on that Newsom conversation, that's a perfect example. It took maybe 20 minutes of the governor's time. It
right.
was seen probably 6 million times plus between 45 different clips shared across the internet on different platforms. If you're in the middle of a crisis, like the governor was, I mean, he was talking about the LA wildfires to Los Angelino in Bryan. Um, it's a really good distribution method, and if you're going to if you have to talk to every local news camera and to achieve their audience, folks like Brian, even pretty outright partisan, is still reaching a lot of the people you need to reach in that moment. And the algorithm in those moments actually does its job pretty well. People are looking for information about the wildfire. They're going to see that content, and so it paid off. And I'm sure they know it too. And I think to your point, I think that's the thing we need to connect people on. And for local officials, um, it's both easier and harder. You just have to find the voices in your community who can move folks. But I spoke to a group of, I don't like the term down ballot for this because they're all doing really important work, but like folks at county level or state level. And, one of the things we were talking about was like, did someone review restaurants in your town on Instagram or TikTok? And half of them nodded. I was like, you should hang out with that person. That
Hmm.
person got great reach. Find the voices. They don't have to be you don't need the three people who follow politics necessarily. Just find the people with reach and find a
that
way to
is
meet them on their level.
that is so important. And I've been talking and thinking about how do we get the reach, the restaurants, the entertainment, and how do we learn to talk about politics without talking about politics? We suck at that.
Yeah.
We really suck at that.
Yeah.
So, the people I reach are going to be politics junkies, and I get that, but let's make more let's see who we can get in the entertainment industry and make more stories that talk about our values, make more series, uh and I think thinking creatively about the reach and the content and thinking beyond, let's talk about policy or the campaign, I think would get us a ways away. And the other thing that I wanted to say that I had blinked on before is time frame, right? In politics, it's all about the next election, either the next special election that's happening next month, or the midterms, or the presidentials, and we've been really bad at looking at the decades
Mm-hmm.
and the and and the just time frames being longer and more strategic. And I think the right, I mean, they've been working on this since Nixon, right? And it should come as no surprise what's going on now, because they've been explicit every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have that kind of attention span on our side. Or maybe we do, and we just haven't figured out how to get others to have that same attention span. Do you have any thoughts on that time frame issue?
I mean, we're definitely, it's something, I have a journalism degree I never used, but you spend a lot of time in journalism school learning like the history of moments and things and coverage, and the this moment we're in now, where it feels like we built the wrong, or we haven't built enough of the right ship for the moment. And why does the other side potentially have these advantages, or it feels like they do? They just never assumed that like traditional media was their friend. And this goes back to AM radio and the Bush era and Rush Limbaugh and
Mm-hmm.
90s. There's 1,000 examples, right? And like you can keep, to your point, you can keep going back and back and back and back and back. And like, you can go pre-Nixon, go Goldwater, and just like
Mm-hmm.
had like a newsletter that was like literally just mailed in envelopes. Like there's a reason, because he wasn't getting any coverage that he liked. I feel like I think, I don't want to speak for the entire left, but I think we celebrate victories as though it's the end of the marathon, and it's like you're on mile 2.
Right.
So I think if you're an avid consumer of politics on the left, like we all, if we were around for it, like all remember ACA happening, and we can name like 5 achievements like that. I think those are just like literally like stop signs for
Mm-hmm.
Republicans, and it's like, oh, we're not nearly done. And I don't think we appreciate the other side having a completely different appreciation of how they see their moments. And I'm sure there are moments, right, like around abortion or whatever, that they're like, no, this was a really good one. But it's not like they've stopped. It's not like they've slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are good examples where we have had a longer term vision. I think labor as a movement has had lots of this. It's a long fight. It never ends. We have to keep fighting. The fight for 15 is not something where they're like, we're done after one state. It was about changing an entire narrative where if you're talking about raising the minimum wage or what the minimum wage should be, the idea of $15 should just be burned into your head. And
Mm-hmm.
that should be the expectation and the counter. And that's what they went out and did. And it was a long, long, still going effort. I think that's the way we need to think of just like, what are we really trying to get to? And if you talk to creators, I would honestly say they have a better sense of this because of the formats that they're in. If you are creating content every single day, and sometimes every hour, you don't just stop when one good thing happens. Like it is a never, for both good and bad, it's a never ending effort to make sure people understand what's going on. And it could be whether you're the most serious political voice online or you're a part-time and you talk about sports the rest of the time. You just understand like the narrative keeps going. And I think the other side, someone else wrote this, and I'm going to blank on who to give credit to, but I think that the Trump administration operates in a soap opera mode. They always have 7 plots going, and depending on who walks into the scene, they bring with them a plot line. And it's a little messy, and you really have to pay attention to like keep up. Or if you just see the person, what's going on a little bit. We don't operate in the same way, and I think we need to sort of think about like, what is this long-term storyline? What are we really trying to get to? How do our elected officials play into that? Because to your point, we're not winning on the nuance. No one wants to hear the nuance, and a
No, we're
lack of
not.
trust in institution is tied to not trusting the nuance either. So we have to move up a little bit in our language and get a little bit more broad in our goal and rally around those points endlessly and hold the other side accountable at that level. Like the idea that we aren't all highlighting the crazy reality that a bunch of still teenagers are destroying government. Like if I told you a bunch of 19-year-olds were hacking every government system on earth, just without any other details. That doesn't sound good to almost anyone, but we're letting it
No,
happen right now, and that should be the thing we should be banging our drum about constantly.
absolutely.
Like, we're giving those kids a pass. We shouldn't be.
I think that what you said, the drumbeat, the word chorus, it has to be repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated some more.
Yeah.
And I think we, like as you were saying, feel like, well, okay, we've got a message for this. Now let's get a message for that. And let's get a message for the other thing. When really the whole message, labor has done this, you know, since they started organizing.
Right.
And
You
I
ask,
think
what
they
does
have
labor want? There's a very clear one, two, three. It's not hard to
exactly.
guess.
And they're organized. I mean, that's the whole point, right? But they have an event horizon that keeps going. And I
Mm-hmm.
think as Americans, we forget that we're part of an ongoing timeline, and we think like, oh, we elected Obama, it's done. Well, no,
Yeah, we're not. It's not over.
we're not done. Um, so I think that repetition and simplifying thing, we're get so darn caught up in the, you know, making sure, okay, this is not, so what I'm saying is we've got a very diverse coalition, and we're generally a more intellectual crowd. So we like nuance. But, and I am not saying that we need to abandon identity politics. I think that's a whole different conversation. That's a
No,
lot of
well, yeah,
bullshit.
I
That's
completely
I
agree.
mean, like the
Yeah,
whole thing is we treat people with respect.
right,
Period. Done. And we need to find different words than diversity, because that's become a bad word, because they know how to take the language and either suck all the meaning out of a word or imbue it with a different meaning than what it actually means. So we have to be on the ball with that. We're
right. We shouldn't
not.
abandon a principle every time we have to feel defensive about it. That's not
Exactly.
a good strategy. Yeah,
That's not a good strategy. So yeah, so finding a way for people to have a backstop um is sounds amazing for my solo. mm, I had one post last week that gave a list of people I thought were good fact-based creators, and that in my scope went viral. Very small scope. Um, the point is that those of us like me who, whatever, make $20 a month can't do it indefinitely.
yeah,
But and so we know that Lee McGowan. Sometimes I speak too quickly, and the McGowans get a little mixed up. She's got an unbelievable personal charisma that I don't know how hard she worked on it to try to make it into her brand, but everyone knows who Politics Girl is.
yeah. She worked really hard.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's clear that she works really
yeah.
hard. That definitely clear.
And she's got her husband's also an incredible talent on the production side. So, to the point on resources, and it's just you. I mean, she's incredible, and she has an incredible teammate to sort of help punch out all this great stuff. Who's creative and thoughtful, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to do solo. It's very hard to do.
So as we, it seems like we can diagnose some of our issues, and we can get at moving towards an array of, I'm not going to say solutions, but approaches. What do you think? I guess, where do you think chorus or multiplicities of choruses? What space do they take in this multiverse, and where else should we be looking?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Our goal is to be a very big tent to help the folks who have a particular issue they're advocating for or a goal they're trying to reach, get it out into the world where people are paying attention to it. And I think in our ideal world, well, I'm always happy to come have a conversation with you. We'd like chorus to be much more in the background moving forward. Right now, I think we need to have this conversation about what the future looks like and how it should be structured. Um, but what we also feel is that we need to let the most impactful voices and those who are becoming the most impactful voices um, be able to grow unencumbered so that we can achieve everything else that we want. And rather than try to overscript them moment to moment, which is not something the other side does, we need to let them breathe and let them do their work and let them talk to their audience in a consistent way. They're the only ones who are tracking the narrative to the viewer consistently every day. The rest of us are reacting to the moments that matter to our organizations or our causes. We need to let the voices do what they do. So, we are trying to build that support structure, and I don't think we ever want to be the only solution to the problem because it's a big challenge. But I think our hope is that we can build the middle part of the puzzle that's like the pieces that are the hardest to figure out where they fit into the puzzle. You can
Hmm.
always find the corners, but the middle's tough. We want to be that middle, and then we would like other folks' programs and efforts to be able to attach onto that. We don't want to duplicate efforts. If someone's doing something, we've already had this happen. Folks said, we're working on this thing, or we have these in-house resources that are, sort of aligned to what you're saying here. We're like, great, can we work together and not have the
Right.
budget to have someone do the exact same thing? That would be great. We like to be very agile. So we're going to keep doing that. So, my call out to other organizations who feel like they're not getting their message out, or they would like to and know sort of instinctively that they should be collaborating at some long-term scale with the voices reaching those people. We want to have a conversation. We want to find a way for you to either work directly with us or underwrite some of this work. And it doesn't have to be dollars, and to make that happen. There's so many other ways to support creators, from resources to conversations. We just want to organize it and bring some sustainability to it. So that's our sort of central thesis now. And then I think the tough part is, like, we're only weeks into this and the barrage has been nonstop, and I don't think they're going to slow down. I know it's like, well, what are they going to do? They'll be out of ideas by summer. That's just not true.
No,
Um,
that Project 2025 was 900 pages and
right.
for a reason.
And that was just their ideas for 2025.
Right.
They could write a whole nother book for next year. It's a joke, but it's also like deadly serious.
It's not a joke.
Yeah.
No.
Um, it's not going to stop. And so I think this thing where we all just need to like sit and think about it for a while. I totally respect that. There's also, in the speed of this news information world, just try some stuff. Like, let's just throw some stuff at the wall and keep moving, because no one will remember it 2 days from now. So you got to keep throwing things. The Daily Wire posts on Facebook every 5 minutes.
Are you kidding me?
Let's
Oh my
go just
gosh.
look at any of their accounts. Go pick your favorite or least favorite thing on the other side and just look at their output on any platform. It's not that they're saying new things every 5 minutes, but they just keep recycling and reposting and chopping it out there to fill this news void and flood the zone. It would be a mistake for us to just like generate AI garbage to counter that. But if we can bring more centralized resources to the voices that we know, when they speak, they break through, even if they feel very on our side. We have a ton of data on the good influence side. We track when people are clicking on stuff. We can match a lot of that information back to places like the voter file. We found in the last 100 days of the election, we were moving as many people who were like clearly Kamala Harris voters as were not. But they saw a piece of content from someone in our cinematic universe, and we're so motivated to take a click to learn more about something. There's no misclicks on influencer content. It's not like an ad that you're scrolling and you accidentally open. You have to go to a link in the bio. You have to go to the comment. No one does it accidentally. So we know those clicks are a really good indicator of who they are and what their intentions were. So if we can do that over the long term, and if we can just get our voices out there and amplify them in a more cohesive way, I really, truly, I think we all on our side earnestly believe like we can help stem this tide And if you look at state ballot initiatives this past cycle, issues we care about on the progressive value spectrum did very well in a lot of places,
Right.
even in the states where we lost. And if you look at really great personalities who had a little more connection to their community, the blue wall fell, but we elected senators in most of those states still.
Hmm.
That's not an accident. Our values do still translate. And it's just a question of how consistently do we get it out there. And we shouldn't hold back our firepower till the last 10 minutes. This is an ongoing, constant thing. And if the other side's talking to regular people every day, we have to do a lot more to do the same thing. But it doesn't mean we have to change what we're talking about. We don't have to pretend to be something that we're not. We just have to do it in this new paradigm that requires a different set of skills. We have all these people who work on Capitol Hill who write press releases every day. They've been doing it forever, and I like them all as individuals, but who are they writing that for? That is a method that informs written journalism, which is still important, but that used to be the entire game. That's why you did it. That's why you had a whole staff doing it. Maybe we need to just change some of the inputs and the roles and the responsibilities in press offices on our side, because where they're trying to get that information out to is just completely changed, and we just haven't caught up.
Right.
We
And,
need to play this game for the modern era.
we do. And there are people doing it
Yeah, quite
at
successfully.
AOC. I mean, like,
Yeah.
they're good models.
Well, and there's I live around New York City, and there are multiple people who are going to be running for mayor who are awesome and progressive, and there's city council members who have fully embraced being internet first in their content. And there's a guy running for mayor who did a whole video about inflation, but it was tied to halal trucks and explaining why the licensing racket to get the license to be a food cart in New York is a complete scam that needs to be regulated better, and the city council should do more, and the mayor should be involved. But he did the whole thing while hanging out in a halal truck and like eating the food, and he's out on the street, and it's so much more approachable than
Mhm.
someone putting out a press release explaining this new bill they just introduced that no one's going to read. That's not how people want to consume this stuff. Like, humanize it, make it approachable. It's not rocket science. You just have to rethink your outputs.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I talk about, I also do leadership development training, is humaning, right? We need to
I'm stealing
get
that
better at
immediately. Yeah.
humaning at work, humaning in politics. Like, we feel that we have to either put up some sort of mask or hide our emotions. But if we just human and know that, the fact that my dog just had surgery is an important thing to me, and you have something that, is important to you, and that's okay
Yeah.
to be part of discussions, I think we get a lot
Yeah.
further.
Yeah. I had dinner last night with a member of my extended family who I agree with on nothing when it comes to politics. We were able to talk all night, including a conversation about how we both are quite confused at what Chuck Schumer is doing these days. And, you can just meet someone on their level. And I think what works about the most effective voices online is you see them for who they are. I mean, going with Lee McGowan, there's an entire group of people who watch her videos and comment on how many bananas are on her kitchen counter. And
Gosh.
if she records multiple videos and posts them, not out of order, but just like by subject, or someone sees them in their feed differently, they'll be like, how did you go from 2 bananas to 4 bananas? Like, what just happened there? Or, just like, there's a whole thing.
So,
Like, she has a picture of bananas in her book as sort of a tribute to this entire like sub niche in her comment section. But that's humanizing, right? That's like,
right.
it's more than just what they're saying. It's how they're saying it, and what's around them. Like, there's
Well, even
don't
talking
need it.
through when she wasn't sure whether she was going to have to evacuate.
Yeah,
That was,
deeply
I
personal.
am from Los Angeles initially. Long time ago, I moved out. But, just those sorts of human stories, they're just so much more engaging than policy.
Yeah, 100%. And it's I think we're all tired of overproduced anything in any format. And you're seeing that play out in how people are reacting to institutions, big and small. You're seeing that in how people just aren't watching the news in the same way. And you're even seeing that in how the news is showing the news. I mean, the level of production is going down, but I think it's because they're meeting people where they are. But it's all because where you're seeing the most traction are real people in real settings who are still very smart and intelligent and hopefully getting great information that we can help back them up on. Just be really direct and cut through the rest of it. I don't know what it says about the larger parts of society. That's where we're at, but it is where we're at. So
Mhm.
that's just where we need to be.
Thank you so much, Josh, for coming and talking to us.
And
And I will definitely keep my eye on what you guys are doing. And as the movement towards becoming more connected grows, um, it's one of my, main goals with everything I do. So I am very interested to see where you take this.
no, really appreciate the time. And if folks haven't seen it from one of our creative partners talking about it and want to know more, just wearechorus.com. There's not a lot there, but there's a way to sign up to find out more. And we'll definitely have a lot more to share coming up. So really appreciate the opportunity to talk about all this. And yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.